Your grandmother's farm is worthless, the Westland Development executive declared, tossing soil samples onto my desk like they were evidence in a murder trial. Contaminated land, outdated infrastructure. We're being generous, offering $500,000. What he didn't know was that I'd spent the last 3 years secretly transforming that worthless land into the most valuable property in the county, not for its development potential, but for what grew beneath its surface. My name is Elena Morales, and until recently, most people in Riverdale knew me only as Abuela Rosa's granddaughter who moved back from the city. What they didn't know was that I'd returned with a master's degree in agricultural science and a plan to save not just my grandmother's farm, but our entire agricultural community. I still remember the day I decided to come home. I was sitting in my sterile corporate office at Agri-Tech Industries, reviewing genetic modification proposals for drought-resistant corn, when an email from my cousin landed in my inbox. Developers circling Abuela's farm again. She's refusing to meet with them, but they're persistent, offering buyouts all over the valley. Attached was a community newsletter featuring Westland Development's grand vision for Riverdale Valley, Sunset Estates, luxury living in the heart of nature. The digital rendering showed cookie-cutter mansions where family farms had stood for generations, complete with artificial lakes and a golf course. In the corner of the image, barely visible, was my grandmother's 80-acre farm replaced by what appeared to be a shopping center. I requested a leave of absence that same day. By the weekend, I had packed my apartment and headed home to the valley where 4 generations of my family had worked the land. Abuela Rosa was 85 when I returned, her body bent from decades of farming but her mind sharp as ever. She wasn't surprised to see me. "You saw the vultures circling," she said, pouring me coffee at the warm kitchen table where she taught me to shell peas as a child. "They think because I'm old, I'm ready to surrender. Are you?" I asked. "They're offering good money, Abuela." Her dark eyes flashed. "This land fed our family when we had nothing else. Your grandfather and I paid for it acre by acre, season by season. What would we be without it?" "But the farm barely breaks even now," I said gently. "The market for conventional crops." "Conventional," she snorted. "Your grandfather would laugh at that word. There was nothing conventional about how we farmed before the chemicals and the big tractors came." She took my hand, her skin papery against mine. "The old ways are sleeping, Elena, not dead." That night, I walked the property alone. The moonlight illuminated fields that had once burst with diverse crops but now grew only commodity corn and soybeans. The soil, once rich and black, had thinned and paled from years of heavy pesticide use and monoculture farming practices I had helped develop and promote in my corporate role. In the far corner of the property stood a small wooden shed I remembered from childhood, my grandfather's seed sanctuary. With a flashlight borrowed from the house, I broke the rusted padlock and stepped inside. The air was dry and still, smelling faintly of dust and dried herbs. Along the walls stood dozens of glass jars, carefully labeled in my grandfather's handwriting. Morales tomato, 1972, Valley beans, 1968, Rosa's peppers, 1965. Heritage seeds, varieties my grandparents had saved and cultivated specifically for this valley, this soil, this climate, before industrial agriculture changed everything. I lifted a jar, wondering if any life still remained in these dormant treasures. The next morning, I presented Abuela with a proposition. Give me 3 years to revitalize the farm using sustainable methods and her traditional knowledge. If I failed, she could sell to the developers with my blessing. 3 years, she agreed. But I won't sell, even if you fail. I'll burn it to the ground first. Her smile told me she expected neither outcome. I began by testing the viability of my grandfather's seed collection. To my amazement, many varieties germinated in my makeshift greenhouse. From agronomists at my former university, I learned cutting-edge regenerative agriculture techniques that, ironically, complemented my grandparents' traditional methods. I sectioned off 5 acres for intensive restoration, composting, cover cropping, minimal tillage. The work was consuming, and for months I barely noticed the escalating pressure from Westland Development. Their representatives became regular visitors, each offering larger sums for the property. When monetary incentives failed, subtle threats began. Mentions of eminent domain, hints at water rights challenges, suggestions that an elderly woman couldn't possibly maintain proper environmental compliance. During this time, I also discovered something remarkable. In testing our soil against neighboring properties, I found that despite decades of conventional farming, portions of our land had maintained unusual microbial diversity. Something had protected it from the worst effects of agricultural chemicals. The answer came from Abuela Rosa during one of our evening sessions recording her agricultural knowledge. Your grandfather always kept the old ways in small places, she told me. The north fields border, the wet patch by the creek, the strip behind the shed. He planted the traditional companion plants there, just enough to keep the good insects, to feed the soil. He called them his seed guardians. These small, overlooked areas had preserved the soil microbiome that industrial agriculture had stripped from surrounding farms. It was our hidden advantage, the foundation upon which our restoration work could build more quickly. By the end of the first year, our 5-acre test plot was showing remarkable results. The heritage vegetable varieties, adapted through generations to our specific local conditions, thrived with minimal inputs once the soil began to recover. We established a small weekend farm stand, selling our produce directly to the community. Word spread. Neighbors began stopping by, first out of curiosity, then returning for the flavor of tomatoes they remembered from childhood, for beans that actually tasted like beans. Local chefs from farm-to-table restaurants in nearby towns made the drive to purchase our heirloom varieties. These peppers, one chef said, holding up a basket of my grandmother's distinctive twisted red chilies, I haven't seen these since my grandmother's kitchen. Where did you find them? They never left, I told him. They were just waiting. As interest grew, I began offering informal workshops on seed saving and regenerative techniques. To my surprise, many attendees were from neighboring farms, the same families who had been considering Westland's buyout offers. Marcus Green, whose family farm bordered ours to the east, pulled me aside after one such workshop. Elena, what you're doing here, it's making me reconsider. Westland offered us $1.2 million, but seeing what's possible with the old crops, the better methods, my kids are suddenly interested in farming again. This was an unexpected development. The children of farmers like me had been leaving the valley for decades. The average age of a Riverdale farmer was nearly 60. But now younger generations were showing renewed interest in a type of agriculture that connected to their heritage while incorporating modern sustainability science. By the second year, we had expanded our regeneration efforts to 20 acres. We installed a small processing facility in a converted barn, allowing us to create value-added products. Salsas from Abuela's peppers, dried beans and heritage varieties, cornmeal from traditional maize. Our profit per acre was 5 times what it had been under conventional methods, with significantly lower input costs. Westland Development noticed. Their representative, a slick executive named James Harrington, requested a meeting at our farm. Ms. Morales, he began, sitting uncomfortably at my grandmother's kitchen table, your experiment here is charming. But surely you understand it's not scalable. Sentimentality about old farming methods won't feed the world. I pushed a folder across the table, our financial projections and soil health metrics over 2 years. Per acre profitability exceeding conventional methods by 380%. Carbon sequestration rates that qualify for emerging climate credits. Biodiversity increases documented by the state university. This isn't sentiment, Mr. Harrington, it's science. He barely glanced at the documents. Westland is prepared to offer $800,000 for the property, double our original offer. Your grandmother can live out her days in comfort. The farm is not for sale. His smile tightened. Perhaps you should consider the broader picture. Riverdale needs economic development, tax base expansion, jobs. Sunset Estates will bring prosperity to a declining agricultural community. Prosperity for whom? I asked. Not for the farming families who've been here for generations. Not for the ecosystem that supports this valley. Progress requires change, Ms. Morales. Fight it if you must, but Westland has secured options on nearly 70% of the properties we need. This development will proceed with or without your cooperation. After you left, I sat with Abuela in the garden, surrounded by plants grown from her saved seeds. The valley spread before us, green and golden in the afternoon light. 70%, I murmured. If that's true, we've already lost. She plucked a ripe tomato from the vine, its skin mottled with a distinctive pattern that made our family variety unique. When I first came to this valley as a young bride, The old women taught me something important. No harvest is guaranteed. Sometimes you plant, you tend, you pray, and still the crops fail. But always, always you save the seeds. Her words stayed with me as I spent the night reviewing property maps of the valley, marking which farms had likely signed options with Westland. By morning, a plan had begun to form, not to defeat the development directly, but to create something that would endure regardless. I called an emergency meeting of the farmers who had been attending our workshops. 20 families gathered in our barn that weekend, representing farms both large and small. Westland claims to have options on 70% of the valley, I began. Even if that's an exaggeration, we're facing the end of farming as we know it here. But we have something they don't value yet. I held up jars of heritage seeds, each adapted through generations to our specific valley. These varieties, combined with the regenerative methods we've been practicing, are uniquely suited to this land. They're drought-resistant, disease-resistant, and produce exceptional flavor with minimal inputs. And they're becoming increasingly valuable in the specialty food market. Marcus Green spoke up. My option with Westland expires in 6 months. Until then, I'm still farming my land. Exactly, I nodded. I'm proposing we create a seed and knowledge cooperative. Each participating farm dedicates 5 acres to growing out heritage varieties using regenerative methods. We share the seeds, techniques, and marketing resources. Most importantly, we create a legal structure that protects these agricultural assets regardless of land ownership. Sarah Johnson, whose family have farmed in the valley for 6 generations, looked skeptical. How does this help if we still lose our farms? Because the seeds and knowledge will survive, I explained. We create conservation easements on portions of our properties. We establish a land trust for farms that haven't signed options, and we prove, acre by acre, that our method of agriculture is more profitable and sustainable than what came before. Or what would come after, added Marcus. The Riverdale Heritage Seed Collective was born that day. Through the remainder of my 3-year commitment to Abuela, we expanded from individual resistance to coordinated action. University extension offices helped document our varieties. Legal aid organizations helped establish conservation easements. Chefs and food writers brought attention to the unique flavors and stories of our crops. By the time James Harrington returned to my grandmother's kitchen table, the landscape, both literal and figurative, had shifted. Your grandmother's farm is worthless, he declared, tossing soil samples onto my desk like they were evidence in a murder trial. Contaminated land, outdated infrastructure. We're being generous, offering $500,000. I studied him for a moment, noting the desperation behind his bravado. Their project was behind schedule. Investors were getting nervous. Contaminated? I echoed. That's interesting, considering our soil has been certified organic by the state. As for infrastructure, our processing facilities handled nearly $2 million in specialty crop products last year. Perhaps Westland's due diligence is as outdated as your understanding of modern sustainable agriculture. I handed him a thick folder, our counter-proposal from the Riverdale Heritage Seed Collective. 30 participating farms. Conservation easements on key agricultural parcels. A certified seed bank of varieties uniquely adapted to this valley. And a sustainable agriculture training center that's already received grant funding. The economics are quite compelling. His face darkened as he skimmed the document. This changes nothing. We have binding options. On parcels now encumbered by conservation easements, I finished for him. Your legal team will explain the implications. But more importantly, you're facing a simple financial reality. Our cooperative's per-acre profitability now exceeds anything your development could generate in property tax revenue for the county. The county commissioners have unanimously approved our application for special agricultural district status. I interrupted again. It seems they're quite proud of Riverdale Valley becoming recognized as a center for agricultural innovation and food heritage. The governor is attending the designation ceremony next month. Harrington left without making further threats, and 2 weeks later, Westland Development announced they were re-evaluating the Sunset Estates project in light of emerging agricultural innovations in the region. Within a month, they had sold their options back to the original landowners at a significant loss. Today, 5 years after I returned to my grandmother's farm, the Riverdale Valley looks both familiar and transformed. Family farms still dominate the landscape, but now they're diversified, resilient, and increasingly operated by younger generations who have found purpose in connecting traditional knowledge with modern science. The Riverdale Heritage Seed Collective now includes 45 farms and manages over 2,000 acres of land dedicated to preserving and evolving heritage varieties. Our seed bank holds over 300 locally adapted vegetable, grain, and herb varieties, many saved by farm families for generations. Our training center hosts farmers from across the country who come to learn how traditional wisdom combined with regenerative science can revitalize rural communities. Abuela Rosa, now 90, still works in her garden daily. Last month, as we harvested this year's seed crops together, a group of agricultural students from the State University came to record her knowledge of companion planting and natural pest management, techniques her grandmother taught her, which science is now confirming as effective. You see, she told them, her hands deftly separating seeds from chaff. The old ways and the new ways, they are not enemies. They are like the corn and the beans and the squash that we plant together. Each one makes the others stronger. One student asked her if she was ever tempted by the developer's money, by the ease retirement could have brought after decades of physical labor. Abuela looked out across the fields where her heritage peppers grew alongside innovative companion crops, where solar panels powered efficient irrigation systems, where neighboring farmers worked land their families had tended for generations. What grows here is worth more than money, she said simply. It is the past and the future growing together in the same soil. Later, as the students departed and the evening settled around us, I walked with Abuela to the highest point on our farm. The valley spread below, a patchwork of fields and forests bathed in golden light. In the distance, a new barn was rising on the Johnson property, built to house their expanded seed-saving operation. When you came back, Abuela said, I thought you were here to save just our farm. I didn't realize you were planting something much bigger. I smiled, thinking of how my corporate agriculture career had once seemed like success, how I had nearly missed the true value of what my grandparents had preserved. The best seeds, I told her, echoing words she had spoken to me countless times, always contain more than we can see at first glance. She nodded, satisfied, as darkness slowly claimed the valley. Around us, invisible in the soil beneath our feet, billions of microorganisms continued their ancient work of renewal and regeneration. And in barns and homes throughout Riverdale, carefully labeled jars of seeds waited for another season, another generation, another chance to grow.